I'd like to call to order the Plan and Zone Commission meeting for today's Tuesday, October 3rd. I've got a couple announcements to make. First, if anybody in the audience has a cell phone, I would recommend that you turn it off because should you get a voicemail, it could bleed into our audio recording. Secondly, I would like to ask, unfortunately, everybody to join me in a moment of silence and silent prayer, if you choose to do so, for the victims and heroes out at Las Vegas for the senseless killing. If you would please join me. Thank you. We will commence first with the public hearing. Roll call, please.
Connell,
Present.
Hebner,
Here.
Ingram,
Present.
Kelling,
Here.
Lammers here, Manus,
Here.
Martinez,
Here.
Med,
Here.
Quinn,
Here.
Reinhardt's.
Here.
Everyone's here.
We have a quorum. Thank you. First item of business is case number REZ 17-09 is a request to rezone 13.345 acres located at the southeast corner of East 53rd Street and Eastern Avenue from C1 Neighborhood Commercial District to C2 General Commercial District. Michael R. Leap Senior is the petitioner. Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Matt Flynn, Community Planning and Economic Development Department. Just give a brief overview before the public hearing commences. Let's see. Out of order already. Location, as I mentioned, southeast corner of Eastern and East 53rd Street. So this top is actually to the south, and this is a vacant piece of vacant land immediately east of the Toyota dealership, and you can see commercial to the mixed commercial to the north, residential to the south. Back up. This is really out of order. Touch on this first of all. This property was zoned C1 in 1999. There were a number of conditions that were included in that rezoning, and I thought I would at least briefly go over what some of the major ones are, because I think as we get closer to the decision, those are going to need to be addressed in one way or another. I think it's fair. So the property is subject to the Highway Corridor Overlay District standards, which again means a little bit higher level of design would be required here. The conditions within that ordinance, and it is in your packet, talks a lot about access control. We want to make sure that those points of access that were outlined in 1999 are still relevant, and the understanding that the developer would pay for those off-site improvements that would be designed to benefit their site are still relevant. Even though this was before any residential occurred, there was provisions for a 50-foot landscape buffer and a 6-foot high wood fence along the south property line, and then there was also a number of uses that were called out as not being allowed on the site. That would include automobile service, oil change facilities, public garage, including automobile sales and service. And as you'll know, that this, as we talked about, this proposed zoning is for the hopefully for development of a new automobile dealership. Other uses: car wash, movie theater, adult business, and storage facilities are also specifically called out. Yeah, we kind of got cut off there, but future land use map is designated as commercial corridor. Hopefully you can read most of the definition for commercial corridor, but well-established corridors located along high-volume major streets dominated by retail and office uses that serve the greater community. Development is generally newer, and redevelopment is not anticipated within the 20-year planning horizon. Improvements should focus on facade and site improvements, including pedestrian circulation systems and consolidated and updated signage. This is the zoning for the area, and again, it pretty much matches, the future land use map with residential to the south, commercial, and also I'll note the planned development district to the west. That's was discussed with the owner, and I think they will maybe provide a little bit more background, the challenges of actually tying a development that's going to include multiple brands of cars at this point, where ultimately it's going to need the cooperation of all the dealerships to come together and agree on a site plan. So that might add a little bit of a challenge if we ultimately are making a positive recommendation and what conditions might be appropriate. So again, these are overview of the issues. Looking at those 1999 conditions, checking the relevancy now, trying to minimize the impacts of this use, particularly with the neighborhood to the south. And being a public hearing, we have no recommendation at this time. Any questions or comments?
Thank you, Matt. Commissioners have any questions? Commissioner Manus? Thank you. Commissioner Quinn?
Man, I was wondering, is that parcel of land to the west where the Smart Toyota dealership is, was that always PDD, or did that require a rezoning request at that time as well?
I know Ryan worked on that. I believe it was already zoned PDD, but you did review the final development plan.
It was zoned PDD at the time. The car dealership had to amend the PDD to take out a provision to allow them to have direct access to 53rd.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lammers?
I need help with my mindset. They're asking for a C2 designation instead of a PDD because of competition. Is that a fair consideration, or are we just looking strictly at the zoning and how it should be applied?
And that was in their application. Maybe I didn't dissect that, but I would maybe address that to the petitioner. Of course, this body hopefully looks most closely at land use and its compatibility with the comprehensive plan, the relevance of the comprehensive plan, as well as comments generated by those potentially impacted by the proposed development.
And then the ordinance, the 1999 ordinance. I wasn't around when that was made.
Neither was I.
There must have been very specific, and I know times have changed, but there was still a strong reason for that ordinance to specify on the restrictions, and I would just like to know what's changed that we're considering the potential to alter, adjust, ignore this ordinance.
I think that is always should be a question to be asked when you're faced with the rezoning, is what has changed that warrants the change in designation. So look forward to working through that one as well.
All right, thank you.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you, Matt. Would the petitioner like to come forward and explain their project?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. My name is Greg Jager. I'm an attorney with the Pasternak Law Firm, 300 block of West 3rd in Davenport. Here with me this evening is Mike Leap, Jr. He's the president of Gurley Leap. He's the gentleman who's really in charge of all of the dealerships throughout the Midwest. Also with me this evening, Chris Pistolek, Nick Tarpin, and Mark, I'm sorry, Mark, Harpole, from Shive Hattery. Mark will be working with staff in order to lay down the site plan parameters. And just as an aside, I was talking to Matt before the meeting tonight. We're going to get together the first part of next week and really lock down some of this so that by the time the conditions come forward, you'll have perhaps a little better understanding or a little agreement between the staff and the applicant on the conditions for the ordinance. What I'd like to do this evening is turn it over to Mike and let him give you a little overview of the project and why he wishes this location. Then I will talk for a couple minutes about the results of a neighborhood meeting and what we see as our responsibilities in response to the concerns raised by the neighbors. The neighborhood meeting was held last week, and I thought it went very well. It was very well attended. At the conclusion of it, it took about an hour. I think everybody was at least comfortable that they had all the information that we had. And that's one of the things I like to make sure that the neighbors do receive. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to Mr. Leap.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Mike Leap Jr., I'm the president of the Gurleap Automotive family. We're the proud owners of the Lujack Automotive Group here locally and also of Smart Toyota. We've been in the community for 11 years. And we need this project to go forward because we need to construct new facilities for our Highline project. Currently, those are with all of our other Lujack stores on Harrison Street there, and they're really in a very restricted location. They were kind of, these different franchises were purchased piecemeal over the years and kind of put into one facility, and just the way people want to do business with manufacturer requirements for dealerships now, each franchise wants their own face in the community. That presents a challenge in a community this size because you want to be able to represent each manufacturer the way they want to be represented, but at the same time, there's not enough volume throughput for each of these franchises to have 4 individual buildings to stand on their own. Just financially, that doesn't work in a community this size.
Can you explain to the commission what you're referring to as the Highline Group?
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
manufacturers?
Those are 4 franchises. That's Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, Audi, and Porsche. Those would be the franchises that we would be locating on this piece of property. It would be one building with 4 different facades, just kind of 4 different storefronts basically, but one common roof that would support the facilities. It gives us cost advantages in building and also in being able to manage one facility instead of 4 separate facilities to make a project like this work. That also is the challenge of this project, is that we have to satisfy 4 different manufacturers with their vision of how they want to present their brand. And I guess the easiest way to explain that is when you drive by a McDonald's, you know it's McDonald's. And really over the last 20 years, all of the manufacturers have really come out with kind of brand standards and a facility look that they want to present to their customers to identify with their brand, and probably no more so than these luxury brands. They're have very strong identities when it comes to what their facilities look like, and all very tasteful and all very nicely done, obviously, because they're trying to portray a Highline image. But to get all those manufacturers to agree to a common plan that represents them all in a similar way, in the way that they want to be represented, also requires compromise on all their parts as well. So the process really is, as we go through this, first of all, we need to have local zoning approval to go to the next stage with our manufacturers, which is the planning stage. And then at that point, when we have our property that they have to approve our site location, first of all, the next step after that is we sit down with each manufacturer. They come out, they do a on-site study, and then they basically have a architect that works for the manufacturer, and they sit down with us and do a design plan for their facility. We're going to present to them our idea of what we think that looks like. We have had an architect do a basic general outline of, hey, this is what we think this is what we're going for, this is what we think it's going to look like, and they're going to come in and say, well, that works for us or this doesn't. It's not one joint meeting. We have to have 4 separate sit-downs and studies, and I mean, the way they do this, it's actually very detailed and very scientific, just the way that, hey, here we're doing traffic studies, and you have ordinances that say, hey, certain amount of square feet and setbacks in this. they have very specific standards that we have to meet as far as showroom space, service space, parts space, parking spaces for customers, parking spaces for employees, drainage, retention. I mean, all those things, each manufacturer, and that's why they have these professional architects, because they don't want us to go out and build something that, number one, isn't going to represent their brand, but also, number two, it's not going to be a great long-term real estate investment that isn't going to work to represent that brand over a long period of time, because that's not a win for anybody. So that's basically why we're here and why we have to have this zoning part approved first before we can go on and get more specific information to you. We can't present to you a full final plan at this point, because they all kind of go in this order when you're working with these manufacturers, and it's a little bit more unique of a challenge when we're working with 4 of them all at the same time. So, we've done a lot of building projects over the years. Specifically in the last 3 years, we've done our smart Toyota project. Is our second to newest project that we've completed. And I think we've done a great job there. It's been a real addition, I think, to modern facilities here in this town, and it's a great resource for our customers, and it's been great for our business. It's brought people to our brand there to be able to represent that brand the way that manufacturer would like to be represented, based on the way that it was before, and we would like to be able to do that for our other brands locally here too. Of those projects that we have done recently, several have been butted up against residential areas. We just completed one really 3 months ago in Elkhart, Indiana, that butted up against some residential property. We've done one in Maryville, Cherville, Indiana recently that butted up against residential as well, and we've been great partners, working with the local neighborhoods, and obviously, and then in addition to the smart facility here. But we want to be good neighbors. We want to be a good contributor to this community, and it's not a win for anybody to not have great partnerships with your neighbors, and whether they're businesses or whether they're residential homes. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we're a good member of this community, and that we're respectful of our neighbors, and do everything we can to be a good partner.
Thank you. Commissioners have any questions of the petitioner at this point? Commissioner Kelling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lieb, have the individual manufacturer reps been here and approved this site, or is this your choice at this point, subject to their approval and subject to the rezoning?
We have verbal approval. We've brought them all out here. We've gone over the site. We have approval to move forward from all of our manufacturers. So they're ready to move forward. We're ready to move forward. So all we're waiting for, this is our next gate here.
Okay. I just seemed to me like it's a very expensive move on your part to do this.
Oh, yeah.
Unless they had already kind of pre-approved it.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you. How many cars are going to be on the ground for sale?
I would say generally a car dealership, especially in a Highline brand, runs about a 30-day supply of vehicles. So for that store, we're probably averaging 40 new. So I would say on the high side, and then I would say on probably about 125 total new and used would be on the lot at any time.
Does that cover all the different brands?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, and I've got a couple more questions. How many full-service areas are you going to have for these 4 brands that you're talking about?
As far as the service shop?
Yes.
Our plan is, because each manufacturer, again, is very particular about, they don't want an Audi pulling into a service drive next to a Mercedes-Benz. So the plan that we have is to have these separate storefronts with separate service drives coming in, entering from the front of the facility, and then a central, in the back of the building is going to be one central shop that each of these drive-throughs would basically dump into to be able to work in the vehicle. So it's going to be one shop facility all along the back of the building. So I'm technically one, I guess.
And how are you going to control all the noise associated with a service department and PA systems and air compressors and all the things that go along with a dealership and the support services with it?
Yeah. Well, most of the noise that's in a dealership is contained within it. Back in the old days, you know, the PA speaker was a pretty common thing at a car dealership, but the phone systems that we have today allow for us to actually forward calls to somebody's cell phone if we want to, if somebody calls in. So typically that's what we do. I mean, the old, you know, sales line 99, that just doesn't happen too much anymore. So we actually have the capability of paging at the Smart Toyota store. It's never been used. We've never given it to the managers. They put it in. We don't use it. As far as that noise, as far as like air wrenches, compressors, things like that. Compressors are always contained within a separate room on the interior of the dealership. So exterior wise, you really don't hear that noise. I know everybody thinks about, hey, the sound of an air wrench or something like that. We don't have plans to have a wide open shop here with separate entry doors for each of the bays. We'd probably have one or two doors, one entry and one exit to the back of the shop. So that would really keep the noise contained within the shop that is there.
And my last question is, what type of lighting are you thinking about using? Are you going to go dark sky, or is there going to be this big white glow at night?
No. Well, the new standard is LED at all of the facilities for cost savings and also for light control. So the light that they have for car dealerships now is a lot more focused than the lights that would have been 20 years ago. And you know, lights for us, it does two things. Number one, if you're driving by at 8 o'clock at night and there's no lights on, it says we're not open for business. And if the lights are on, it says we're open for business. So light, it is important to our business, but it's not very important after hours. So after hours, we like to, and this is at all our dealerships for cost savings and everything, that we like to dim the lights down. We wire them when we lay them in, that we can bring them down to half power. And we just basically have them there for after hours for security purposes. You just want it lit up enough to where people don't see it as a theft or vandalism opportunity.
All right, thank you very much.
Commissioner Lammers.
When you look at your long-term strategy, what impact is this pulling of the luxury brands out to the existing location?
For our entire business? Mm-hmm. Well, it does a couple of things, but one of the things that it does, and I'm sure you've all driven by our stores there at some point, that Harrison Street, the dealerships are very packed in tight there. So while we haven't come up with our final plan of how we're going to repurpose that building, a lot of it is all their other franchises, believe me, are looking to us to upgrade facilities, you know, across our lines. So we're looking at different opportunities of how can we combine different pieces of property and again, kind of represent our brands more separately than they are today, because we have some that are combined and crunched in. So I don't know if that answers your question or if I'm getting where you're.
Is it your plan to remain at the Harrison Street location?
Oh, yeah.
Or to break apart each of the different manufacturers and spotting them throughout Davenport?
No. Our intention is to still remain at that location.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any additional questions at this time? Seeing none, thank you.
Just a couple quick additional
sorry,
points.
Greg.
That's okay. Again, we did meet with we met with the neighbors last week. I think that went very well. They did raise some concerns. I wanted to highlight them so that you know what the neighbors expressed and how we're looking at trying to respond to them. Before I do that, I just want to talk for a second about the rezoning dimensions. One of the neighbors inquired as to whether the dimensions for the rezoning was absolutely correct. Staff had highlighted that issue as well. We're in the process of having the ground that's being subject to the rezoning actually surveyed, so we'll have a very precise legal description, and we will provide that to staff very shortly. The area that is shown in your packet as being rezoned is actually, we think, slightly larger than the area that we're actually making an application for. To the east, our rezoning application ends at Spring Street as opposed to going beyond Spring Street. The area beyond Spring Street extended is ground that is being retained by the seller of the property. But we want to make sure that we get that information precise to staff, and we will do that. Also, since the seller is retaining a portion of the ground, the seller has come to us and talked a little bit about whether it makes sense to do a joint stormwater detention facility for our parcel as well as for the seller's remaining parcel. We're talking to the seller about that. That would be certainly something that would be reflected in the ultimate site plan. We can assure you that we're going to follow the city code both in terms of quality and quantity, but if it makes sense to do a larger joint facility, we're still talking to the seller about that. The question of noise gets you really to the question of buffering, and staff talked about the conditions that were in the existing ordinance. When we talked to the neighbors about buffering, there were a couple of people there who were concerned about the trees that are on site currently, and they actually called them nuisance trees, in that they were dropping a lot of branches and making a mess in their yard. So I understand the condition of the zoning says it should have a privacy fence. I think some of the neighbors would like to see the trees removed. There may be other neighbors who would like to have these older, larger trees preserved. My thought is we'd sit down and work with staff to get that resolved, keeping in mind the neighborhood concern that maybe some of the trees are nuisance trees and ought to be removed and some of the trees ought to be preserved. But that's an issue that was raised that we'll address with staff. The diagram that you see in your packet shows most of the development going on the westernmost portion of the parcel being rezoned. So that would leave an easternmost portion of the parcel. And the question was raised, what are we going to do with that? And the answer is at this time it's simply being reserved for future development. And our intent is to put it in grass so that it will look nice. It will not be a detriment to the area, but it will be reserved for future development. As for impacts for the road and the traffic system, just to let you know that we have paid for a traffic study. A lot of the work has been done. I got some emails on it today. There were some concerns about locating pins that are located in the middle of 53rd, and they have to figure out a way to stop traffic in order to do that, but they're going to do that. We will get the traffic study completed and get it to staff as quickly as we can. We understand that there are concerns. As Mike has indicated to you, this is not a high volume impact development. That is, God bless that we could all afford brand new Mercedeses and Audis and the like, Porsches. But the truth of the matter is that's not a brand that's going to be 1,000 people a week are going to buy. And so you're simply not going to get the kind of traffic through here that you might get from other developments. But we agreed with staff that a traffic study needed to be done. It's being done. We will get it to them as quickly as we can. On the question of lighting, Mike has indicated to you downward cast LED, the dark sky concept is exactly what we're looking at. I think that may be a term of art in this area that Mike is not as familiar with, but that's exactly right, with a focus of the lighting to the north. That is, to the extent that the lighting is on the south border, focus it to the north, push it away from the residential areas. And as Mike indicated, they can turn it down. They do turn it down somewhat at the Toyota dealership. In talking to Nick earlier this evening, he indicated that within the last 3 years, the Gurley Leap dealerships in this area have suffered over $100,000 in vehicle damage. So the idea of having some lights and having the ability to camera the lots and be able to identify the wrongdoers is a very important thing. It's a substantial dollar amount, but we also want to be cognizant of the neighbors, and we want to make sure that the impact to the neighbors is minimized to the extent possible. Towards that, we did have one neighbor at the neighborhood meeting talk about the impact of lighting from the Toyota dealership. But if you look at that site, the Toyota property sits up higher than the adjoining residential. That makes it harder to shield the lighting. Our intent here is to have a much closer grade to the existing residential property so that the impact of the disparity of height should be minimized. Grading plans obviously have to be reviewed and approved by city staff as well. There's also a question about the noise and how that's going to be addressed. I think Mike did talk about that. I will tell you that just in terms of the neighborhood meeting and our response to it, one of the neighbors said, hey, I hear from the Toyota dealership sometimes that the car salesman will go out and can't find the car. So they push the alarm key on the key fob, setting off the car alarm. And that's a distraction to the neighborhood. Nick, who is the platform manager for all the Gurley dealerships, Gurley Leap dealerships here in the Quad Cities area, said, I'll take care of it. And he went to his staff the very next day and directed them to stop that practice. So when we are aware of issues, we will address those issues. We do want to be a good neighbor. And this use of car alarms is something that hadn't been brought to our attention. Now that it is, we've stopped it. The only other issue that I can remember being raised was the issue of potential litter on site. And I don't think that you see a lot of litter at higher-end platform vehicles. But to the extent that it's there, Nick has indicated to me that there is a daily review of the property location. They have someone going around to check to make sure that everything looks nice. And obviously this is their luxury car divisions. They're going to want it to look nice. It's going to be important to them that the areas stay very neat. So, Mr. Chairman, just very briefly, the rezoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan. There is an existing car dealership right across the street, which I think does show that there can be good integration between the adjoining residential and this particular use. A car dealership use is a smaller impact than some of the other commercial uses that would be allowed in the code. For instance, the dealerships themselves are closed on Sunday. And to the extent that there is a car wash on site for the vehicles serviced by the dealership, that car wash is closed when the dealership is closed. So it only operates at the same time that the dealership is open. And you see a car wash facility in the Toyota facility. I don't think it's generating the kinds of impacts that a 6-stall or an 8-stall self-serve car wash with the automatic washes and brush through generates. It's simply not the same type of use. Nick also indicated in front of the neighbors that the doors are shut on the car wash while the car is being washed, so that those noise impacts are reduced as well. Gurley Leap wants to and will be a good neighbor. We understand that it's obviously easier when you can do a PDD and you can see how it's all going to lay out, but it's just not going to work for us in this case. There are too many cooks in the kitchen, too many people who still want to have a hand in having the ultimate design of the building. The city staff has indicated to us that they will sit down and we can work through conditions on this rezoning. We're happy to do that. We understand the city code exists that have certain conditions that we have to meet. Things like quality and quantity of stormwater, we will do that. We don't have any problem with any of that. It's just a question of our being able to work it through the process. And so we're going for a straight rezoning as opposed to a rezoning to a PDD, and we appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. And again, I apologize for cutting you off. I did not intend to do that. Commissioners have any questions? Commissioner Lammers.
Staff, excuse me, can you refresh my memory? If they're reserving land for future development, would that future development have to come back before us? Or is that once this decision's made, they can do what they will on their land?
Well, if it's land that's zoned C2 at this time, no, it wouldn't. But you could also, if there are conditions that may apply to other future unannounced uses that maybe are crafted to address concerns with the car dealership, you could, you don't have to limit those conditions to just the area that's going to be used for this particular use.
Okay, thanks.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Manus.
Thank you. I am a little confused since you are addressing all the issues that would be raised by a PDD why a PDD won't work. I
They-
just don't quite understand.
At this point, we haven't gotten sign off on either the actual dimensions of the building or the facade for the front of the building. And we've got to run it through 4 separate platforms with 4 separate architectural reviews. But we have a time pressure in acquiring the ground and getting it zoned. We can't get through the administrative process with the dealerships before the end of the year. And that's how long it'll take to get the rezoning done. It's the first meeting in October for our public hearing, second meeting in October for your decision, first meeting in November for public hearing in front of the council, and it works its way through into December. The council does not like to have a city council meeting at the end of December. They prefer to have that time off to spend time with families at the holiday period. So it sounds like it's a long way out to be talking about setting a neighborhood meeting in September in order to get something done by the end of December. But that's the process that we have, and that's the process we have to go through. We're just not in a position to delay this process in order to handle the other part of it. But from my past experiences, I realize that how it's going to look and what the impacts are very important, not only to the commission, but also to the neighbors. And so we're trying to walk that line. We want to be able to say, we understand, and we're going to abide, and we're going to do the things that you would normally see in the PDD. We just aren't able to do it at this point in order to get it through the process.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kelling.
Thank you. One, I know this is ahead of your plan at this point, but can you identify what part of this parcel would be set aside for detention? Is it more to the southeast? Is it pretty much to the east? And I also know that would be dependent upon doing a joint detention area with the property owner there to the east. But do you have an idea where it would be placed at this point?
I probably ought to ask the engineer to come up, but I will say generally it would be on the southern portion of the ground, not on the northern portion of the ground. Generally to the east of the ground, not centered or to the west of the ground. Some of it, as you suggest, would very much be based upon what happens to the agreement with the seller. But the neighbors don't want to see any more stormwater on their property than is already there. And our commitment to them is, we'll follow your codes. Your codes say you got to reduce the amount of stormwater that's released, and that's what we're going to do. Your codes say we got to make sure that some of it gets absorbed into the ground for quality concerns, and that's what we're going to do as well.
Is it likely that there'll be an agreement with the property owner to the east about a joint detention area before this comes back to us?
I'm going to turn that over to Mike because he's the guy who's in command. Do you think you've got a deal in the next 2 weeks on stormwater?
I doubt that. I don't know if they're, I just don't know if physically, time-wise, that part can happen yet. And again, because part of this is the seller is trying to, they want to maximize the value of their remaining property as well. So as they do the grading on this, we've come to the agreement together that we want to be able to be partners and maximize the value of their property. So to do that, we need to see what our final plan is. So it's going to be hard to, I think, to get that all wrapped in at the same time.
All right. Thank you.
Any additional questions at this time? Seeing none, I would like to thank you.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak in favor of the petition at this time? Would anybody like to step forward and speak in opposition to the petition? If so, please step up to the podium and identify yourself.
Thank you, and I don't know that I can actually say I'm against this, but I have some questions.
Can you
My name
please-
is Sandra Barras, and I live south of the proposed facility.
Thank you.
First of all, I don't know what a PPD or a PDD or a
PDD.
PDT or whatever. If someone could explain that to me, I believe it's more of a completed plan where you actually see what it's going to look like, how the grade. If I'm mistaken in that, I would hope someone would tell me that.
Matt?
You got it.
Okay, okay. I live at the top of the cornfield, so when I walk up my berm, I can walk clear across the cornfield without going down any level. But some of us live at the other end, and they walk out of their yards, and there's no berm there already. I am just having a lot of difficulty visualizing how this is going to work out if I'm going to have a 4-foot berm at the end of my property and then a 10-foot drop down. It's just beyond me how this is happening, and so I guess it concerns me that we're doing all of this and yet we really don't know what we're in for. That's my only concern, that it could change things, I think, a lot for us, because there's a lot of dirt to move there on that corner, and not being an engineer, an architect, or a construction person, that just gives me some concern as how it's all going to work out.
Will there be grading design in 2 weeks, or is that down the road yet?
I would really doubt that there would be grading
Okay.
plans done
Okay.
shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to step forward and ask questions or be in opposition? Commissioners, any additional questions? Seeing none, we will close REZ 17-09, and it will return to us October 17th, same place, same time. We'll move on to the second item, case number REZ 17-10, request of Women in Spiritual Hope Ministries, Inc. to rezone 7,841 square feet MOL of property located at 5210 North Division Street from R4 Moderate Density Dwelling District to CO Office Shop District. Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ryan Rusnak, Community Planning Economic Development Department. This is a rezoning of a 7,800 square foot parcel. To the left is a zoning map, the property highlighted. Property is currently zoned R4. It is adjacent to another office shop district. To the right is the future land use map for the city. It's designated residential general. Really didn't have a plan to go too far into the request at this time because it's a public hearing. We did send notices to property owners, sent 18 notices. There were some properties that were not owner occupied, so we made sure we sent them to the owner and then current resident just in case somebody happened to be a renter for that property. So there's a total of 18 notices sent. We did receive one letter of objection, and I provided that to you. That letter will be incorporated into the next final staff report that staff provides. The petitioner did hold a neighborhood meeting last week. The chairperson was there as well as myself. We did have two property owners that were present. One property owner I thought appeared to be amenable to the request, perhaps with the condition of a stockade fence around the property. The other property owner that was there was pretty adamantly opposed to it. Let me see here. So again, really not too much to get into the technical aspect. There is really, as I understand the use, it's an existing house that would be converted to a rooming house or boarding house. Probably makes sense to talk about the definition. It's a bit of an older definition of our code, but essentially allows people to share a room. And that would be the utilization of this property in a house mother, but I'd really like the petitioner to describe the actual use of the property. The CO district, as I understand it, was selected to allow, because boarding house, rooming house is a permitted use within that district. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ryan. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Lammers.
There is one property already zoned CO right next to it, but and it may be because of its existence not relevant to my question, but I looked at this and I thought, we have a very small use here in the zoning. Would it be considered spot zoning? Because everything surrounding it is residential.
I don't know when the PDD zoning across the street came in, but assuming that there were commercial zoning across the street, one could argue that it's not entirely surrounded by residential zoning. If there were residential zoning across the street and to the northeast, I would probably say yes.
Thanks.
Any additional questions? Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Would the petitioner like to step forward and explain their petition?
Good evening, Commissioners. Mr. Chairman, my name is Brett Marshall. I'm an attorney with Lane and Waterman, and I represent Wish Ministries, who's the petitioner or the applicant for the rezoning in this case. And in a minute, I'm going to turn the time over to Lynn Johnson, who is the executive director and the co-founder of Wish Ministries, to tell you a little bit about the program, a little bit about her background. In addition to Lynn, we have several members of the board of directors for Wish Ministries that are in attendance tonight and will be available to answer any questions that the commission has. I'd just like to comment briefly on the neighborhood meeting that we held last week. As a credit to the city and staff, I think we had more city staff members there than actual neighbors. So we appreciate that and the city's involvement in these kinds of matters. As Ryan said, there were a couple neighbors in attendance, and the main concern I think that was raised was safety, and reasonably so. This use is going to be for women who have previously been incarcerated, but that are looking for a fresh start in life, and so safety is obviously something that's important to the neighbors. But I would also like to say that the applicant, Wish Ministries, has expressed nothing but a cooperative attitude in trying to address those concerns. And we can address reasonable safety concerns. For example, one of the neighbors said that they would be in favor of this if there was a fence put up. And Wish Ministries is in favor of putting up a fence, in favor of putting up floodlights, and providing whatever extra security measures need to be put in place in order to allay the fears and the safety concerns of the neighbors. So having said that, and again, the applicant is willing to cooperate with city staff in any conditions that city staff determines necessary to do this. One comment as to why we chose the CO. As was shown on the map, the property directly to the north is already zoned CO, and we thought that would be consistent. But to the extent that the commission feels that a more intensive zoning use, which also allows this type of use, is appropriate, the applicant would be willing to commit to that and to look into that as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Lynn Johnson, who's the executive director. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. Wish Ministries, Women in Spiritual Hope, is hope for the hopeless. That's exactly what it is. Hope for the hopeless. Women that have fallen through the cracks at an early age, women that grew up with abuse, alcoholism. We didn't get them out. And so now they're in prison. And these are women who want to change. I do a jail ministry in Scott County and Rock Island. I do a jail ministry. I see women every day who want to change but have no other choices. They're released from jail with the clothes they were in when they went in. If it's in the middle of the winter and they're wearing shorts and a t-shirt and barefoot, that's how they leave that jail. And where are they to go? That's what this home is about. It's hope for the hopeless. These are women who really want a second chance at life, who fell through the cracks, and us as a village and a community owe them a second chance. We owe that to them. And that's all it is, a faith-based home. The reason we're asking for rezoning is because this house is huge. This house has 6 bedrooms in it. And the bottom floor is totally equipped with a kitchen and a laundry and 4 bedrooms in the whole bottom half. And the top half has the same thing, a kitchen, a dining room, and a laundry with a couple bedrooms upstairs. So the best use for this house, for Wish Ministries, is we're asking to increase the limit to 6 women that we can serve at one time. People who have been incarcerated, who have no other place to go except back to the street, back to drugs, back to prostitution. Now, statistics have shown, and they are available on websites, and I can quote them to you from 2010 to 2015. 94% of the nation that is incarcerated will return to jail within a year. In Iowa, the state of Iowa alone, that percentage is 97% of those people that you unlock the doors to will be re-incarcerated within a year. But if you add a faith-based program to it, that percentage drops down to 18%. And we're talking about women who come to us. I go to them, I administer them, I share the Word of God with them in their jail cells. And when they leave, they go, where is she now? Where is that hope now that I'm outside of jail? And that's why we developed Wish Ministries. Hope for the hopeless. And we're just asking to increase the size because the home is so large, it can hold 6 people.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions at this time? Commissioner Reinhardt?
Yes, thank you. Do you have any other facilities like this in the general area?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. What types of crimes would we be seeing people that would be coming into this facility?
We're talking really, well, I don't know if you consider minor crimes, but we're talking about women that were caught up in drugs or prostitution, basically. Okay. We're not talking about murderers or really violent people, no.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
At the neighborhood meeting, you went into a lot of detail as to how the women were being chosen, how they're housed, their freedom, their visitors. Could you explain a little of that to the commissioners at this point?
Absolutely. It will be a secure facility. They must check in and check out just like they would at 605. They must leave there with a buddy. They cannot leave there on their own unless they're heading to a work environment where the location is perfect because they can catch a bus to go and be employed. We are working with several clubs and people in the business community to get them jobs even. We're working with the Rotary Club and Kiwanis business people in the area to actually be able to get them good paying jobs when they're out so we can change their life. We have been asked to put up a fence, and we will have floodlighting, and there will be security. They'll be locked in. They'll be basically locked in. It'll be very quiet. I mean, all the things that are going to be going on inside will be things like Bible studies and cooking classes. We'd like to build a garden in the yard and teach them how to can, things that they didn't learn when they were growing up.
I think you had mentioned about the allowance of visitors or no visitors. Could you clarify that?
Yeah. There will be no visitors on site, and they will have no children on site. We have been talking to the Safer Foundation, or the children will be housed with a grandparent or legal guardian while they're in this house, and the children will never be on site. They may have visitation rights to go to grandma's house with supervision to see their children, but their children, if they have children, will not be there. And they will, and the property itself, the property itself will be a non-advertised location. It'll be like a domestic violence shelter. We're not advertising the location. They will not have cell phone usage. They will not have contact. The only time they can have contact is if they go to work, but they will not be able to disclose the location of where they're at. So we won't have drug dealers coming by to try and sell them something. We won't have ex-boyfriends coming by to see if they're all right, because the location will be kept a secret. They want to be there.
Thank you. Ryan, could you step up for a minute? The petitioner mentioned the reason for this rezoning, and I think you brought it up at the neighborhood meeting, was because of the quantity of people. I think you had mentioned to me that they could actually bring in 4 women or something to that effect and not have to go through the rezoning, but because they want to have 5 or 6.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I wanted to point out, and yeah, that's really the primary one. If you have 5 unrelated individuals living in a house, that's considered a permitted use for single-family residence. You know, it's difficult in these circumstances because you want to talk about the actual use of the property, but sometimes you've got to talk about the zoning too. So that's kind of another point I'd like to talk about. But yeah, essentially, if you had 4 disadvantaged women and a house mother in one unit, that's a permitted use in the current zoning district. Once you bump that above that threshold, then that compels a higher density zoning. Normally, for a multifamily zoning, you require 2 parking spaces per residential unit. This property is very limited in the number of parking, and as discussed at the neighborhood meeting, these women are not likely to have vehicles or have a lot of vehicles. But the parking requirement is 1 parking space for each housing room. A preliminary look at it, you can get about 4 or 5 parking spaces really on the front of the property. So a boarding house could be defined as something up to 20 units, but the actual density would be much limited based on the actual configuration of the property.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kelling.
Thank you. 2 questions, Ms. Johnson. How long has your organization, your Hope Ministries, been in existence, and what is the source of your funding?
The source of our funding so far has been donations. We've gotten quite a bit through the United Methodist Church in Southeast District, and we've raised through a comedy night event. We've raised all the money that we have, and we have just about $10,000 in the bank right now that we're starting with. But we have more promised to us once we actually have the house up and running. And I forgot the first part of your question. I'm sorry.
The length of time of your ministry.
Oh, the length of time. We started on January 8th of 2016, so almost 2 years.
Okay. What happens to this property or to the people who would live there should the funding not be available? Let's just say something
Well,
happens.
our bylaws say that if it becomes non-functioning, we transfer it down into, and what we probably do is give it to a 180 zone, to a program much like ours, if ours doesn't become productive.
Your ministry would actually purchase this property, or you have purchased it already?
We're in the process of purchasing it, pending zoning. But we are willing to move forward with just the 5 people in the house if we can't get the zoning. But it's such a big house. It's a shame to waste the extra rooms.
Right. But once again, if the funding should dry up for whatever reason, hopefully that wouldn't happen, would the property go into forfeiture then, or what would happen?
No, it would be I don't know the word I'm looking for. It would be transferred over into another similar organization for use.
A similar organization to yours, or one in competition with you, or another one that's owned by your ministries, or
No, not owned by our ministers, because this is the only one that we have. It would be an organization similar to ours.
Okay, I'm kind of ignorant on this, so pardon my questions, but are there other women in spiritual hope ministries around in the Quad Cities?
No, but there are other organizations that do kind of the same thing, such as the 180 Zone, and there's the House of Hope, and there's one, I can't think of the name, in Rock Island that one of our board members volunteers very readily at. So it would be transferred. It'd be transferred over into them if this doesn't make it.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Martinez.
Just question, do you plan to have more than 6 women in the house at any time, or is
No.
6 about the maximum number?
6 is the maximum.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Quinn.
I had a couple of questions. What do you anticipate the average length of stay of theirs is? Are these women there for months at a time, or are they just there for a week or two at a time, or
When they enter the program, it's a 1-year commitment from them.
1 year? Okay.
Yep.
So then the next question would be: is there full time or at least partial time supervision? I mean, what happens in the case of emergency or something goes wrong? How does your staff respond if something were to go wrong? Are you there all the time, or-
There is full-time supervision. A house mother will be there 24/7. Of course, we'll probably give her some time off and days off, and that'll be filled in by volunteers, our staff like me and my co-founder, and volunteers in the community. We have several volunteers already speaking up and willing to help us out.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Manus.
Am I right to assume that you don't have to make any structural changes to this single-family home, or is it actually a duplex since it has 2 kitchens?
That's correct. It is actually a duplex, a top and the bottom. There is a entrance to the bottom floor around the back, on the back side.
You mentioned floodlights and locking. It would seem to me like you would want to keep this in the character of a single-family residence or a duplex, so it would fit into the neighborhood rather than floodlights and fences and that kind of thing. Have those things been designed, or did you work them out with the neighbors? Or?
No, we haven't, and we didn't even, actually, we never thought about it until it came up at the meeting we had last week. One of the ladies had asked us if we'd put up a fence and make sure that there would be not really floodlights but motion lights. So if someone were sneaking around by their backyard or something, the lights would go on to show that there was somebody out there or something out there. And that was asked to us by one of the residents there, and that eased her mind. So we said we basically would consider it and do it.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to step forward and speak in favor of this petition?
Seat's a little farther down than when I sat in to start with. I'm Dick Phelps. I live in 1 Kenwood in Davenport, and I am a board member. I want you to think about one scenario. When you look in the mirror, do you like what you see? Have you ever looked in the mirror and said, well, I don't like him very good. I need to change. Change is difficult, but it's mandatory. This program, when you have these individuals in this house, you have training lessons, schooling going on, as Lynn said, even canning, so they know how to be proud of themselves. Everyone in this building wants to be proud of themselves. But if you're not proud of yourselves, how do I change? I never had the opportunity to change. Change is difficult. So you help them with budgeting their money. You get them a job. You help them with budgeting their money. Oh, I didn't know I was supposed to. What do you mean I take my money to the bank? It's my money. They have no clue. You help them with balancing a checkbook. There's a lot of people that could use that. And these are the things that we look at and we take for granted when we go leave this building. And they need to take it for granted as well. They need to be able to have a second chance, to be able to do the things that they never knew was out there. And that's what Wish Ministries is about. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to step forward in favor?
Good evening. My name's Mike Herman. I'm the board chair for Wish Ministries. And I would just like to say that, several years ago, I was faced with a lot of life difficulties myself. and I found it very difficult to work myself out of them. And it wasn't until a few group of people came around to my life and said, okay, you know, we see that you need a hand up and not a handout. You know, so many programs here in this area give a handout, and we're not for that, because once we start giving people what they want, that want continues forever. But when we show people, you know, it's like teaching a man to fish. You don't ever have to teach them to eat or to ask for food anymore, because they know how to acquire it. And the importance, you know, some of the questions that have come up this evening, especially about the type of people that we're going to be having in the house. We can't sit back and we can't guarantee a 100% success rate of each individual that comes into our house, but we can guarantee that we will be the responsible party when it comes to difficulties facing the neighborhood. I mean, we will be the go-to people. We won't have to sit back, well, we're not responsible for this, or we're not responsible for that, because we are. And I would just like to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jane Lange, and I'm also a board member, and I just wanted to address your questions just a little more if I could. This ministry is not something we just thought up. Our leadership read a book called Miss Brenda and the Love Ladies, and it's about a similar ministry that was created and how it is expanded to the point that now they took over a former hospital and run this huge ministry. And as far as the funding, our plan is we have churches that are co-partnering, if you will, and we're hoping that they will say, okay, this woman here, we're going to take a specific interest in her. We're going to pick her up every Sunday and bring her to church. We are sponsoring her, so we're help funding her. So it's not just our little board. We're hoping to connect with a lot of the community resources that are already there. If the woman needs a GED, I'm not going to teach her how to pass a GED. We'll connect with an organization that's already there. So hopefully that gives you a little better feel for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to step forward, speak in favor? Seeing none, would anybody like to speak in opposition?
Hello, I'm Shirley Foland. I live directly west of the proposed property. Aligned with it, probably my door is 35, 40 feet from theirs. There is a high fence there. This house is built up to where their picture window and windows face directly into my yard over the fence. They can watch me go, come, what I bring in the house, when I'm gone, when I'm home. I know they say they cannot converse with outside friends they had before. Well, but they are getting on a bus and going to work. They are meeting people they knew. If, let's say I go out and buy a new TV and I bring it home in my door where they watch. They go to work and go home. They talk to their former addict friends. They come to my house, take my TV when they know I am going to be gone. That is one part that I do not like. The other part is, for my safety, if they lock their doors, they watch them come in and out. They do not let them run around in public. Where I am living 35, 45 feet from them, very easily to access my property. I live alone. There's nobody much lives on the whole block except them, because the houses are empty. There's one at the corner that's rented now, is empty most of the time. And I'm 77 years old, have very little defense. And I am scared of this project. And I don't know how to get unscared of this project. Not that I think it's a bad project. I think it's a wonderful project. I just cannot bring the fear from my body out to let this go on without trying to stop it because of the fact that I don't know how to protect myself from this. And I have seen some of these people, women that got recently out of lockup. They're not all the nicest people. And I'm not either, but they aren't either. And I am scared, and this is what I want to bring before you, as I am scared. And if there's some way that I would be unscared, like I said, I do think it's a good program. I have nothing against the program. It's just for my own safety, I do not feel safe with this program being 35, 40 feet from my door and watching everything I'm doing because they can definitely see my whole yard that I use between my house and my garage where I'm at. That's where my flowers is at. That's where I put my dog out. That's everything. See me when I come and when I come home and know all of my movements, and they are not back into society yet. There are still the same children, like she said, that were not raised as we were and have the same morals and standards as we do. They're trying to get them. Good luck. But still, I feel uneasy and scared living alone with nobody living around me with this type of a facility that close to my door. And this is what I wanted you to know, is that I do not feel comfortable. And that's all I have to say is it scares me to death to think of it. But I do believe in what they're doing. I just wish they could get it in a place that's already zoned and they could do their good work. But I am scared, and I just hope they're not there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to step forward?
Good evening. My name's Andrew Smith. I'm the owner of 5130 North Division, which is 3 houses south of the property that they're talking about. I submitted a letter, and I think you all have it.
We do.
Okay, and I wanted to add to that, this house is within 1 mile of a school, a middle school. Many kids walking through the neighborhood. My granddaughter, as I said in the letter, goes up and down the street. For her to know that there's sexual criminals, drug-using criminals that are 3 houses down from my house, which I bought this house specifically for the reason that there was none of this stuff around there, and or even proposed during the time. I've been in this house now 2 years. I own it directly, straight out. I have no mortgage on it. So this is a very big investment for me. And to have somebody, tell me that tonight they were raised without, this and that. My father broke my leg and my skull when I was a kid. I didn't turn to criminal. I didn't turn to drugs. I went in the Marine Corps. I went and served the country. I did my share fair. Why do we have to support and be in support of these people that have messed their lives up and have to rebuild their lives again? And in a residential, a primary residential, on that would be the west side of that whole lot is all residential except for a State Farms building that I would like to know when it became a CO, because I don't even know. As long as I've been there, it's always been there. So, and try to put 6 people in a house that are all criminals and cannot guarantee that they cannot break out of a window, jump a property fence, go rob, kidnap my granddaughter. These are all enlightened things that are not addressed. There's not bars on them windows, so it'd probably be against the coding. You're putting criminals in my neighborhood, and that's just not fair to us, especially people that bought a house in this area and moved from a place that had this kind of stuff before. I lived in Pittsburgh. I came here to avoid this stuff. This is supposed to be a good town. Well, it needs to stay that way. So if any questions, I would like to know when that CO happened on that State Farm, and why they're trying to get this to be an office space when it's a boarding house.
Staff will look into that.
That's all I have. You all have my letter, right?
Yep.
Do I need to
Yes,
read
we
it,
do.
or you?
No,
you got it?
I've got it. Everybody here has it.
Any questions from you guys have?
Commissioners, Commissioner Kelly?
My next question was to be addressed to Ms. Johnson again.
Okay.
So we're good?
We're
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Would anybody else like to speak in opposition? Okay. You can come forward.
Just one more quick question. What is the average age of the residents of your program?
anywhere from 18 to 80, I guess. I have several women that are 65 years old and have needed a place to live when they get out. So I didn't have any other place. And I have some that are 18. So the age, I mean, we're not discriminating because of their age.
All right, so it's not a concentration of young versus older or
Nope.
middle-aged or anything, just a cross-section of people.
Nope.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Commissioner, hang on just a second. Commissioner Lammers?
Could I clarify that the existing zoning as it stands today would allow this, but with 5
Correct.
people? All right, thank
Correct.
you.
Commissioner Med?
Thank you. Your board, are they all Davenport residents?
No.
Are they Iowa residents?
One is Rock Island, I think.
Okay.
And 2 are from Bluegrass, but they're Iowa. 2 are from Bluegrass, 1 is from Rock Island.
All right. And the women that you'll be helping, are they coming out of the Scott County?
Some will come from
system?
Scott, some will come from Rock Island, some will come from Mitchellville.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Lammers?
How long has your ministry been in place?
The Wish Ministries?
Yeah.
Since January 8th of 2016.
2016. And this would be your first
This would be our-
initiative for
Right.
the transition.
Right.
house.
We've looked at several other houses, and this is finally the one that we wanted to settle on because of the size and the rooms that were available.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Manus?
I'm wondering if you have thought about trying this out and doing it with 5 people, which is allowed as a use by right, see how it goes, and then pursue the rezoning to add another person or 2. Is that something that would work for your group?
It is something that we have considered, and yes, we would move forward with 5 instead of the 6 that we're asking for. However, our budgeting, when our financial director set up the budgeting, he tells me that the house could be self-sufficient, not have to be, I mean, we'll still ask for donations and stuff, but the house could be self-sufficient with 6 people in it, and they're all working. At the time they start working, it would be self-sufficient to run itself, and so that's why we're asking for the increase, basically.
To follow up on that, are you going to be charging rent to each of the people there?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you've already done all the numbers and put that together?
We've done all the numbers. Like one of my board members said, we're going to have churches, mentoring churches that'll take one girl at a time, and we'll have money coming in from that. I mean, it'll be donations from different churches. Plus, they'll be paying a weekly amount from each paycheck that they have, which will make it self-sufficient. If we run it with 6. With 4 people, we'd be struggling with money and have to look for other ways to fund it, yes.
Can I ask what the rent would be?
$100 a week is what's set up, $100 a week for the women that are participating, and that makes the home self-sufficient, according to my financial director, who's not here. So I'm not the money girl. So.
Commissioner Lammers?
One last question. I thought I read that there was a discussion about doubling 2 people per room for a total of 12. Did I make that up, or
no?
Or did I read that?
No. No.
And if not, if I didn't read that, is that consideration for a future strategy?
No. Our future strategy is once we get one house up and running with 6, we think 6 is a manageable number for one house mother, would to build another house, and probably on the other side of the river, and build as many as we need until we can service all the women who want that second chance.
All right, thank you.
Any additional questions? Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That will conclude the business, the 2 agenda items for the public hearing. These items will come back to us here October 17th at 5 o'clock. Thank you for your participation. We will now start our regular meeting. Roll call, please.
Hepner,
Here.
Ingram,
Present.
Kelling,
Here.
Lammers present, Manus,
Here.
Martinez,
Here.
Med,
Here.
Quinn,
Here.
Reinhardt's,
Here.
Connell.
Present.
Tallman is excused. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Report of city council activity. Thank you. Secretary's report.
Move the report.
Second.
All in favor of the secretary's report is written.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. We'll move on to comp plan. Any news?
We do have a first draft of the zoning ordinance that we're trying to work through. Staff will do an initial review and then have a work session with our consultants probably within the month or 5 weeks or so, and then we will strategize on getting that draft finalized and have another round of open discussion.
Thank you, Matt. We'll move on to zoning activity. Old business, Commissioner Lammers.
It's me. Our first zoning activity is request REZ 17-05 of Stephen and Meredith Hirsch for the rezoning of 0.65 acre, 28,340 square feet, more or less, of real property located at 5135 Marquette Street, south of 53rd Street and east of Marquette Street, from R1 Low Density Dwelling District to R3 PUD Planned Unit Development to facilitate development of multiple residence, two-unit buildings. Staff recommends that Plan and Zoning Commission accepts the findings in forward case REZ 17-05 to the City Council for approval, subject to the listed conditions, and I so move.
Second.
Case number REZ 17-05 has been moved and seconded.
Mr. Chair, you do need to remove this.
Oh,
from the
that's right.
table.
This was on the table, wasn't
Yes, I forgot to add that.
Yes.
Boldened, so.
it? So, before we accept that second,
I'll take back my second.
we need a motion to remove this from the table, please.
So move.
All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is off the table. Do we have a motion to discuss REZ 17-05?
So move.
Scott?
So, as you are aware, it was tabled, and some of the reasons for tabling, they didn't have a concept plan showing us that the structure could fit on the property. They have such given us that now, and it's in your packet, and it meets our requirements. They've also given us some more detail on the kind of the concept plan that they're using. This is kind of the preferred elevation, but my understanding is it's going to, look more like, as far as the number of garages and the layout's laid out, it's going to look more like these two concepts, but this will be the architectural style type. So our findings are that it is compatible with the residential general designation of the comprehensive plan. The proposal supports infill development, and the concept and elevations are compatible with existing residential development in the neighborhood. Our recommendation is that the commission would forward the case REZ 17-05 to City Council for approval, subject to the following conditions: that the final development plan be conform with the renderings shown here, and this significant deviation from this would require a revision to their plans and come back to you. And there also, the city engineer dedicates some of the front property line to match up to the existing property line to the north as well.
Thank you, Scott. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Lammers.
You missed me. I've been gone for a while. just one general question. Are you comfortable with the safety factor of traffic pulling in and out of these respective homes?
Yes, we've had it reviewed by the technical review committee, and there was no concerns regarding that.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Quinn.
So there's a couple setbacks are only 7 feet from the property line. That's been reviewed by city staff, and they're okay with that. It doesn't seem like very much.
That's the required setback, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Kelling?
No.
Lammers? No. Manis?
Yes.
Martinez?
Yes.
Med?
Yes.
Quinn?
Yes.
Reinhardt's?
No.
Connell?
Yes.
Hepner?
Yes.
That gives us, and Tolman excused. 6 yeses, 3 noes. It passes.
Thank you.
And then we have case number REZ 17-08, which is still tabled and no action is necessary. So that in essence concludes the zoning activity, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Lammers. We'll move on to subdivision activity. Commissioner Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 4 cases tonight. The first one is case number ROW 17-06, request of the City of Davenport for the right-of-way vacation abandonment of 10,370 square feet MOL of public right-of-way south of the west terminus of Dugan Court and north of the west terminus of the right-of-way south of Dugan Court. Staff recommends the Plan and Zone Commission accept the listed condition and forward case ROW 17-06 to the City Council with a recommendation for approval without any special conditions, and I so move.
Second.
Case number ROW 17-06 has been moved and seconded for discussion. Ryan?
Just here for questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any questions from the commission? Seeing none, we will take roll call, please.
Lammers, yes. Manis?
Yes.
Martinez?
Yes.
Med?
Yes.
Quinn?
Yes.
Reinhardt's?
Yes.
Connell?
Yes.
Hepner?
Yes.
And Kelly.
Yes.
And Tolman is excused. That's 9 yeses.
Thank you. Next.
Okay, my next case, Mr. Chair, is case number SNC 17-01, request of the City of Davenport Public Works Department to change the name of a segment of Forest Grove Drive east of Utica Ridge Road to Forest Grove Court. Staff recommends the Plan and Zone Commission forward case number SNC 17-01 to the City Council for approval, and I so move.
Second.
Case number SNC 17-01 has been moved and seconded for discussion. Wayne?
You have before you the area that is under consideration with the new alignment of Forest Grove Drive at this location. Basically, the property in this area, the right-of-way in that area, would carry basically the same name, so Public Works Department needs to change that name so there's no confusion. This would become Forest Grove Court. This area would be pavement removed. Until such time as that's removed, it would also remain as Forest Grove Court.
Thank you, Wayne. Any questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
You were faster than my ability to get to the light. Just a general question on the Veterans Memorial Highway name. Why isn't that just consistent within the city boundaries?
Well, when it was first named, it went from Brady Street to Utica Ridge Road. The name did not continue beyond that because it was Forest Grove Road or Forest Grove Drive. And that's kind of the contention here is it actually has three names if you looked at the report. In this situation, it was because it's going to be connecting to Forest Grove Drive that then continues from Davenport into Bettendorf out to LeClaire. It was easier to say from Utica Ridge Road it'll change.
Okay.
And that so it'll carry from Utica Ridge Road to the east, one consistent name.
Okay, thanks. All right. Manus.
Yes.
Martinez.
Yes.
Med.
Yes.
Quinn.
Yes.
Reinhardt.
Yes.
Connell.
Yes.
Ebner.
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
Lammers. Yes. Tallman excused. 9 yeses.
My next case is case number SNC 17-02, request of the City of Davenport Public Works Department to change the name of a segment of Veterans Memorial Parkway, Old 67th Street, located between the new Veterans Memorial Parkway and Utica Ridge Road, back to East 67th Court. Staff recommends the Plan and Zone Commission forward case number SNC 17-02 to the City Council for approval, and I so move.
Case number SNC 17-02 has been moved and seconded for discussion. Wayne?
I seem to have lost my second presentation, but this will also suffice. Veterans Memorial, because of its new alignment here, requires the name change of this portion of the old Veterans Memorial Parkway that was renamed, I think it was in 2009, 2002. I'd have to look at the report. And basically, again, a segment of the pavement would be removed here. This would then become a court. So the name change would be East 67th Court. It had been called East 67th Street.
Thank you, Wayne. Any questions? Any questions, Commissioner Lammers? You had your light on? Okay. Roll call, please.
Just trying to be proactive. Martinez.
Yes.
Med.
Yes.
Quinn.
Yes.
Reinhardt.
Yes.
Connell.
Yes.
Hepner.
Yes.
Kelling.
Yes.
Lammers. Yes. Manus.
Yes.
And Tallman excused. 9 yeses.
Thank you.
My last case tonight is case number F17-18, final plat of Landon Prairie, being a replat of part of Lot 2 of Victory Acres, located north of Kimberly Road and west of Marquette Street, 1366 West Kimberly Road, containing 3 lots. Staff recommends the Plan and Zone Commission forward case number F17-08. I think there's a misprint there. To the City Council for approval subject to the one listed conditions, and I so move.
Case number F17-18 has been moved and seconded for discussion. Wayne?
This is Landon Prairie. It's located off of West Kimberly Road, west of Marquette Street. This is the old K's merchandise. This is the area of the plat. It's a Victory Acres lot that goes quite a ways back to 40th Street in this area. It is zoned residential, R3. It is residential general by the comp plan. Basically what's driving the request is there's property owner, that's part of the plat, but then there's also an owner, one of these lots here, I'm not sure which one, that is driving the petition or the application. Basically, what they're wanting to do is create a buffer between the residential and the commercial at this location. This would be a landlocked parcel, could not be developed unless there were some access created to it, which would more than likely require a replat. This is the existing house, so it has a residential use. This lot, because it will have frontage on 40th Street, could potentially be developed, though the intent of the petitioner is to offer it for sale to at least one of the adjoining owners, also to create a buffer yard. But it has the potential to be a residential development because the lot is large enough, but at this time that's not the intent.
Thank you, Wayne. Commissioners, any questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Med,
Here. Yes.
Quinn,
Yes.
Reinhardt's,
Yes. Yes.
Connell,
Yes.
Hepner,
Yes.
Kelling,
Yes.
Lammers, yes. Manis,
Yes.
Martinez.
Yes.
That's 9 yeses.
Thank you.
That's the end of my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Connell. It appears at this time that we do not have any future business other than the 2 public hearing items that we heard tonight. Is there any additional communication, staff, or anybody in the audience? Seeing none.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are therefore adjourned. Please drive home safely.